What's up, everybody? Coast to Coast Podcast here, coming at you live on a Monday. Yeah, we're recording a little bit later today because we were waiting to find out who North Carolina would play in the Sweet 16. And now we know that it's going to be the Alabama Crimson Tide. As usual, we are brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt and our friends at Congruity. I'm Joey Powell. Glad you guys are here. Shout out to the folks that are already tuned in, watching us live. Appreciate you guys being in the chat. As usual, Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran are here with us live tonight to break down the haps in North Carolina basketball. But before we start, I want to apologize ahead of time for this rant, but I need to get this off my chest. And Sherrell and Sean were unaware of where I'm going, but I need to get this out into the open. So bear with me. But I need to speak to some folks that probably will not hear this, but I don't care because I speak for the people. I'm talking to certain bracketologists out there. I'm talking to you, Joseph Split Screen, Harry Palms over at CBS, Roth Johnstein. How about some accountability, huh? All season long, you clowns chirped about how bad the ACC was, propping up every other conference that you could find. The Mountain freaking West, are you kidding me? These guys had no stats. They had no empirical data to back up what they were saying. All they had was a platform with zero accountability, as per usual. Yet, as we sit with the Sweet 16 now in place, the lowly, meager ACC with its soft, those are your words, guys, league play, now accounts for 25% of the squads left standing. Boys, your jobs solely exist for what exactly? Here's an idea. Maybe, instead of watching graphs and whatever stupid metric you created in your mom's basement, let's consider actually watching ball, learning rosters, and considering what competition does for a basketball program. Until then, stop covering up the TV screens for us that really want to watch ball with your stupid faces and filling up our Twitter feeds with your self-aggrandizing field predictions and whatever sponsored verbal diarrhea your employers like to call content. We don't need you. We don't need your faux metrics. We don't need your forced opinions. Allow us real fans to enjoy the games without your propaganda that you spew every January to March and destroy the sport that we all actually enjoy watching. All right, I'm good. Sorry, I needed to get that off my chest, but I am just absolutely over these clowns that continually drive the narrative. And if you don't think that the committee that puts together the tournament, if you don't think that they actually see what fat-headed ESPN says and they don't take that into account, you're absolutely misreading things. I'm just over those guys every year ripping on the ACC, and yet here we sit the second week in March, and the ACC once again has more teams standing than anybody else. That said, everybody take a breath, find your zen, and let's talk about UNC basketball. Why don't we? North Carolina had a very, very successful weekend in Charlotte. Shout out to the fans that were there because that sounded like a home game, and that's exactly why North Carolina needed to get those two games in Charlotte. Because when they made that run against Michigan State on Saturday afternoon, that was essentially a home game. And it was really, really something that probably helped get them over the edge. North Carolina successful against Wagner, successful against Michigan State. And now let's bring in the guys that you guys came to hear. You guys and gals came to hear. By the way, shout out to Lauren Parikh, one of our female viewers and listeners. Want to give a shout out to our female listeners, so appreciate that. UNC was sluggish against Wagner, and kind of did what they needed to. It wasn't pretty, wasn't flashy. Sean, what was your takeaway against that win over the Seahawks late Thursday? I guess early Thursday. Sorry.
First, maybe go back to your rant, and not to stay on the topic. I would like to shout out Sherrell for his Gonzaga prediction last week. That helped me save going on McNeese. But I think the errors of the committee, or the group think, I think opened up a lot of opportunities in other ways. If you were in North Carolina and betting legally or making predictions on games, because I think it was an easy way to look at the teams in the Mountain West, the SEC, and the Big 12, and identify which ones were for real, maybe one to two per conference, and which ones were not. And it provided ample opportunity to make some money over especially the first 2 days, and then not as much over Saturday, Sunday, but still provided those opportunities. So I thoroughly enjoyed that aspect of it. But I think when you do look at the Big East only getting 3 teams in, that doesn't make any sense. The ACC, as much as you hate some of the other teams, it is nice to see the conference well represented for the 3rd year in a row. But at the same time, the ACC has done some of this to itself with how bad the bottom of the league has been and some of the bad early season losses. But all that being said, in terms of UNC, it was a sluggish early start. Once again, going against the 16 seed, I think this is why over the years, especially when UNC was a 8 or 9 seed, you have those games where you can almost get a tune-up of sorts, and you don't have to really worry as much about each and every single game. But they did turn it on in the second half, and I think from a points per possession basis, obviously going against Wagner, but it was their best game since Georgia Southern. So they played extremely well offensively, and then that led into Saturday and why we're here right now, and hopefully talking about the Tar Heels in LA.
Sherrell, did you have any major takeaways from Wagner, or was it just one of those, all right, you won the game that you had to play, let's worry about the next real matchup, which was against Michigan State on Saturday?
Yeah, that was probably the first thing, and you could tell there were little nerves, especially from the guys who had played in their first NCAA tournament game or who hadn't played one in a while. You could definitely see they pressed a little bit, just trying to. I know it was like they were trying to score 7 points on every possession. We all know that's not really possible, but I think sometimes they forget about that during the game. But they settled down. I think it was just one of those things. What I do, I guess, what is concerning is that's 3 straight, or really 4 straight if you go back to Pittsburgh, slow starts for UNC in their last 4 games. I think they were down by 8 or 9 early to Pittsburgh. Same thing with NC State in the ACC championship game. Wagner, obviously, they're more talented then, but still was close back and forth for a little bit. And then obviously against Michigan State, they were down by 12 in the first half. So I think though that's probably a thing that's a little bit concerning. But other than that, Wagner they did what they needed to do. It wasn't pretty. And if this was in November, I would have probably a lot more to say. But the objective is to win the game, and they won by 28. So for me, that's really all that matters outside of a semi-slow start.
I was going to say, I think if it was in November and in years past, it might have been a 15 to 18 point win or something like that. So I think, that the winning margin does show the power of this team and where they're at right now, that we're talking about it that way versus some of the other games we've witnessed over the past few years.
I'm sure there's probably a joke in there too about how that game hurt UNC's net. Sherrell, I would be a liar if I didn't say that watching that Wagner game, I could hear you in the back of my head saying, this is just a team that North Carolina is more gifted than, to rip off an old Roy Williams phrase. So then let's move on to hang on a second. Before we move on, Jalen Withers was absolutely a difference maker in that Wagner game. I think if you could paint a picture of what Jalen Withers' contributions could be, I think that Wagner game is probably pretty close to what you would draw. Sherrell, what say ye?
Yeah, and that's what you would expect in a game against a team like Wagner. You want the more athletic guys to get out in the open court, run, take advantage of their size, take advantage of their athleticism. I remember, I think it was Texas Southern in 2017. UNC played as the 1 seed. And Tony Bradley, you would have thought that he was the second coming of Hakeem Olajuwon and Shaq mixed together, just because there's that much of a disparity in size and talent and athleticism. So it was good to see that he actually did it, but that's what you expect. That type of player, a Withers or a Washington, that's what you expect from them in that kind of game, to play a little bit above what they usually do, because they are just frankly better players than who they're facing.
It was good to see, and I think while he looked a little spastic against Michigan State early, he definitely settled down and just seeing him, make that little sneaking in the back door screen where literally he's like hunched over like he's going to steal a pie off somebody's windowsill, and then Armando hits him wide open for a layup. So let's talk about that Michigan State game a little bit. It really came down to kind of 10 minutes versus 30 minutes, and it looked like two games in a sense from a North Carolina standpoint because they did not look great for those first 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden, something changed. And I'm going to ask you, Sean, from what you saw, what did you see differently after that interview that Hubert Davis did with the sideline reporter? That all of a sudden, there's a timeout, and then the game changed. What did you see schematically that North Carolina was doing differently?
Well, I think just to go to the start in terms of what Michigan State was doing, it looked like almost the Villanova game plan on offense of trying to use the size and strength and one-on-one and back down, and they were hitting pretty much everything they were throwing up, and you're saying how the heck are they hitting that, and worried it was going to last the whole game. Defensively, they were following what NC State did in the championship game, playing probably even farther off of Elliot Cadeau and packing the paint. So you kind of saw exactly what they were trying to do early on, and I think they were doing that to perfection those first 10 minutes. UNC was, I think, a little tight, rushing things a little bit, and Michigan State was playing at their peak level, and then it started to shift. But I think UNC's commitment to defense, I think Harrison Ingram, he really stepped up his game and became that difference maker. So we always ask, how are Ingram and Cormac going to play? And I think Ingram stepped up tremendously, and Ryan played a good, I'd say a decent game offensively, but you really look at him defensively, and it goes not what you're going to see on the counting stats, but in terms of how hard the whole team is. But you really look at Cormac on those guards, how he's fighting to stay in front of everybody, get through the screens. I think defensively, it was just a little bit more attention to detail in terms of playing a little more physical. And then offensively, I think it was not getting bothered as much from Michigan State perspective, running their sets, starting to hit shots, get confidence, opening it up a little bit more, and all of a sudden, the game started to expand. But I think it was, they kind of got hit in the mouth first, but they were able to get up pretty quickly and adjust both offensively and defensively.
One of the, I think, disturbing things that a lot of folks saw, and it jumped off the screen at me too, was early in that game, Michigan State was able to start wherever they wanted. North Carolina was not really contesting any entry passes, was not really stopping Michigan State from getting to their spots. Sean, I saw them after that adjustment to where it seemed like they were with Michigan State's players on the catch a little more. And I don't know if that's just extending defense out or if it's just engaging your want to, so to speak. Do you feel like that was a schematic change, or were guys just more fired up?
I don't know how much of a schematic change it was. I think it was more just UNC getting back to what they've been doing the majority of the season from a defensive perspective. I think Michigan State in general was a good shooting team from the outside, but not a high volume team. And they did love to take those tough twos. And between UNC continuing to force contested shots, I think, look, you weren't expecting Michigan State's bigs just to back down, hook shot, time and time again. So Armando, once again, I thought played extremely well defensively, where he was able to stay in front of the guards, but also provide help side to contest at the rim, but not give up lobs or easy passes, which I think is definitely something we should talk about with Alabama, because they're going to be a lot more aggressive in terms of looking for those lobs. But I think it was just continuing to force tough shots, but even a little tougher than what they were doing, because Michigan State was really the one dictating how they were taking those shots in the first 10 minutes.
Sherrell, when I watch this team, it seems as clear as crystal that the defense starts the offense. And I can't think of a game where it was more case in point of that. Maybe the Florida State game in the Smith Center when Carolina was down really big early and started using a little bit of full course man-to-man and full court trap stuff. But this one specifically, it just so much defense triggering the offense, and then they went on that 23-3 run or whatever absurd number it was Can that be overstated? Like, is it really that simple, or do you just feel like it's just the level of engagement that maybe makes this team thrive, and then it shows up offensively?
I mean, I don't think it's overstated or understated. I always get those two confused. It's like, it's just this team, when they play defense, they are a defensive team. Like, you asked us in January, and I said you were wrong. They are a defensive team, and when their defense is doing what it's done all season, they're really hard to stop because, Carolina didn't run really the last couple of years like they have in the past, really since 2019, and now they are running. They're getting out in the open court, and it's all cyclical. Like, your defense allows you to get a stop, you get a rebound, which is a really good rebounding team. They've only been rebounded like one time in the last like 20 games or something. So you get the rebound, and then you're able to push up the court, which gets you into transition, which can hide some of the deficiencies that some of your players have offensively. And when you do that, you score, you get excited, you play better defense, and it just starts going downhill, and it's a snowball effect. So to me, it really is like, I know it's simplistic, and it seems like just it's got to be more complicated, but it's like, if this team defends, there's not anyone they can't beat. I know there's only 15 other teams left, but if this team defends, they can absolutely win a national championship. It's not far-fetched at all. And I think the lapses are the issue. They're just it's hard to play 40 minutes of hard-nosed defense where you're running off screens and switching and running up and down the court. That's really hard to do. So if they can just minimize those lapses, I mean, I think they have a great shot.
And I think one thing we've always talked about: what is the bench going to provide? How is the bench going to play? And I think when UNC got down early, it was I've always been, hey, we got to keep Cadeau in there as much as possible for the for the offensive freedom and what he does. But the move to bring Trimble in and how Trimble played right off the bat, I thought helped change the course of the defensive intensity that they were bringing, as well as made Michigan State, especially Walker, think a little bit more about what he was trying to do. And Trimble getting the basket, and then Washington getting the basket, cut the lead. Now, granted, Michigan State pushed it up again, but I think it just gave UNC, hey, we're treading water right now. And then when the starters came back in, Cadeau got the 3-point play, Ingram got the 3, and now things started to churn a little bit more efficiently for the starters.
I think, Joey, what really, and there's not like one moment you can say the Cadeau 3-point play, because they looked offensively, they looked dead in the water before he got that. But to me, it was just Armando Bacot, man. And I'm sorry if I'm stepping on your toes if you're going to segue us there, but there was just the way he's transformed himself to be able to off those switches, just stay in front of guards. And then it's gotten to the point now where when he gets switched onto the guard and the guard gets past him, it's kind of like, do you really want to do that? Because he's going to block the shot most of the time. I think he might have been credited with 2, but I remember the one in the first half that led to a run out on the other end. And it's just, it's a marked change from where things stood. If you remember, after that Georgia Tech game, a lot of the analysis, I think, not from here, but a lot of the analysis was, well, if Armando Bacot, you put Carolina in ball screens and you put Armando Bacot against guards, he's going to get toasted in their defense. That's why it's not playing as well. Well, that's why you have to remember it's a very, very long season, and there are ebbs and flows. And this last 10 games, man, defensively, I think he's just really been locked in. I said it to Sean and to Rob and to Ben in our little side chat. Like, to me, I think he's playing better than he's ever played when you can consider the totality of everything he's asked to do. The whole package. I mean, he was passing out of double teams. He was scoring off of double teams, scoring in single coverage. He was, playing great defense, getting blocks, getting rebounds, hit a jump shot, hitting his free throws, like doing literally everything it takes to win. So to me, that was the catalyst. I thought just the way that once UNC kind of bowed up a little bit, they had nothing for Bacot offensively or defensively inside.
When he hit that jump shot, I was just like, man, if he just
did the baseline jumper, you talking about that?
Yeah. That was just one or two times. I mean, it would just free him up so much, but he took it extremely confidently, knocked it down, and it was in rhythm. But I think that would just free him up given how much pressure teams are trying to put on him in the post. But to see him score effectively like that with the ball in his hands versus off offensive rebound or a transition, I think, once again, if he's doing that, because Michigan State, their bigs were not good, but
They're not scorers. They're not offensive bigs.
But they brought a lot of different,
like 5 of them.
Strength, and then the other, one had length. So there's a lot of differences, and they're just coming in versus some of the other bigs that he'll see. So I thought, just to echo Sherrell's point, he played a fantastic game across all aspects, and him not picking up a second foul was huge. I think it took him away aggressively, but him picking up 2 could have completely altered how that first half was played. So I think in years past that might have been a guarantee that he's going to pick up 2 at some point. So hats off to him for being smart enough to be able to know how to play through it.
I was gonna say that he bullied the bullies. Like that's the whole Michigan State mantra, right? Is they're tougher, they're stronger. Detroit strong, big 6'9" Xavier Tillman, 245-pound dudes.
Save the auto industry.
Yeah, they might not have a ton of skill, but like they'll get in a fight, and they want to play in the. That's their whole entire identity of that program. And Armando Bacot basically bullied them inside for the entire game. So to me, that says a lot about his play right now and where UNC is.
So one of the things I want to point back to what you said a second ago, Sherrell, about how he is doing when he gets isolated in high ball screens. If you will watch, and I saw at some point during that run at the end of the first half, Tyson Walker had Bacot isolated on the free throw line extended right side outside the 3-point line. And Bacot's probably 5.5 feet off of him, but with his wingspan, that's enough to contest a shot. And Walker literally, like you could almost see the thought process in his head. He's like, all right, he's sagging too much for me to get around him. And he also may block my shot, to your point, Sherrell. And then he puts up just a bad shot with Bacot right in his face. And Bacot's, he's gotten to the point where he's smart enough not to foul those guys. And that's absolutely a facet of his game that, when everybody was looking at the box scores early in the year, like that Georgia Tech game, and everybody was banging on him and just ripping on him for this, that, or the other thing. This is when we go back to what the three of us said, and I'll toot y'all's horns a little bit, toot. We made the comments that he was doing what North Carolina needed, right? He was doing what North Carolina needed from him at that position. And if you'll go back and watch that stretch in the Michigan State game, he's got 2 blocks where he blocked the play from behind because he timed it well enough and knew what the ball handler was going to do with it, and absolutely erases that. I think it's a big thing, and it's not to be overlooked when you're looking at what he's doing right now, even if it doesn't show up as a block or a stat. Something else I think it's important to talk about, Sherrell, you mentioned it a second ago, so I want to spend some time with it because it's something that this team really changed their season when they started digging in this way was the rebound margin. North Carolina had, as you said, Sherrell, they had won many rebounding battles, and this is the first game that they were out rebounded since that Oklahoma game that Hubert Davis made it a really, really big emphasis in practice. North Carolina was out rebounded. It wasn't bad. They got out rebounded 37-32. But the difference that I see is I look and I see that North Carolina had 5 offensive rebounds and 10 second chance points. So that means every time they got an offensive rebound, they got a bucket off of it. Sherrell, is this one of those things where that stat can change the rebounding battle altogether because you're getting more out of it? Or is it still concerning that they did lose the rebounding battle in this game?
No, I don't think so, because again, that's what Michigan State emphasizes. All the times Tommy's been on here, he's talked about Tommy Ashley. You are what you emphasize, and they emphasize rebounding maybe more than anyone in the country since Roy Williams retired. They're talking about Michigan State, so it's not a bad thing. You don't want it to happen often, but I think it again shows the growth of the team when you start talking about what we all were saying as people who follow the program in that early December, mid-December time range. It was against UConn. It was just like they couldn't grab a rebound. It was like, this is going to be a huge issue for this team moving forward. And kind of they flipped the switch during Christmas break, and rebounding hasn't been a real concern since. And to me, that says that, again, they are locked in, they're dialed in, and that they accept the coaching, and that the coaching can grow and change, and as Hubert likes to say, pivot and tweak as the season goes along, because it went from a severe weakness, I would say, in the beginning of the season to now it's one of their biggest strengths. Again, they were number 1 in offensive rebounding percentage in the ACC play over 20 games. So it's just kind of back to what Carolina traditionally does well. So it's not a worry just because of who the opponent was, but that is a path to victory for them when we start talking about Thursday.
Sean, I want to ask you too, against a team like Michigan State that will run a lot of big bodies against somebody like Armando Bacot, and they've got more athleticism, I think, than most of the Big Ten does. You being our resident Big Ten basketball expert, how do you attribute North Carolina's ability to rebound the ball from 9 different guys? I mean, 9 different guys in the stat sheet recorded a rebound in the game, and none of those guys were. Sorry, I take that back. Yeah, one of those was Creighton Lebo. Everybody else were actual guys that are in the rotation. What is it about North Carolina and how they get to the glass or how they strategize offensively or defensively that allows everybody to contribute on the rebounding end?
Well, I think offensively, as you mentioned, that was for the most part shut off throughout the game. So I think they did a good job of adapting, and defensive rebounding was huge. I think from earlier in the year, where over the years you feel like Armando has just carried his weight right in the defensive rebounding, and you look at his metrics over the year, and from a defensive rebounding perspective, it's kind of gone up or down. This year he was 5th in the ACC. Last year he was 4th. In years past he's been number 1. So he's had to give some of that up. But I think when you have a guy like Harrison Ingram, who maybe an undersized 4, he's taking that aggressive mindset to fight Armando almost at times for defensive rebounds. And then you have guys coming off the bench, Jalen Withers and Washington, that know what their role is. And I think they've been in pretty good position. And I think let's definitely talk about rebounding when it comes to Thursday, because I think that will be one of the keys to the game. But in terms of the position, they're not out of, they're staying in front of their man. If they have to switch, they're switching correctly. They're playing connected together, and by doing that, they're not out of position. They're in good position on the defensive glass, and they're able to, I think that is a focus point to pound the glass defensively and turn that into transition or half court play. So, to me, that is one of the keys for Thursday in terms of who's going to win the game.
Sherrell, I want to ask you, because you kind of led into it a bit ago, but I wasn't ready to go there yet. You've mentioned North Carolina's had a less than stellar start the last few games. How do they avoid that against Alabama? We're going to talk fully about Alabama here in a second, but if we've seen anything, Alabama would like to score the way that old Roy Williams teams like to score. They want to, as we saw against Grand Canyon, they want to run up and down, with their hair on fire, whether they're actually doing offense or not. How can North Carolina avoid kind of that, I guess, sleepy start, that dragging start, that start where they're kind of feeling things out? Because at this point, everybody's good and every segment matters. So what can they do to be a little sharper at the tip on Thursday night?
I would say it's not what people think. It's not be more intense, be more aggressive, be more. I think it's just relax, understand that it's a basketball game. There are going to be nerves. It's a Sweet 16 game. Of course, there are going to be nerves, but don't try to do something that you remember the Patrick Ewing clip where he's talking to his player and he's like, I've never seen you shoot that shot. Have you ever shot that shot? And he's like, no. He's like, I've never seen you shoot that shot. Like, it's kind of that mentality. If there's something that you do in the first 5 minutes of a game in the NCAA tournament that you haven't done all year, you need to take a break, take a second, take a breath, relax, breathe, and just understand it's still a basketball game. Yes, the stakes are higher, but it's the same game you've been playing for 33 games previous in the previous 6 months, I guess you could say. So to me, that's what it is. It's not more. It's just settling and being relaxed and understanding exactly what your job is and being focused on that. So I think if they do that, that will help a lot with the slow start.
So I'm thinking, and I want to make sure I'm understanding you here. So essentially, if you feel like you're doing something you typically don't do, like say, Seth Trimble comes up and tries to post his man, or maybe he launches a 3 from the logo, he should stop, gather himself, and just try to clear his mind and maybe think about something else like Johnny T-shirt, right? Like I would think that, focusing yourself and thinking about, man, Johnny T-shirt would be great right now. You could go to he could like wait until halftime and then go to johnnytshirt.com and pick himself something out. And he's totally recentered himself. He's gotten the shot from midcourt. And I'm just not just picking on Seth. I'm not just picking on Seth. I'm just, anybody. I just happen to think about Seth because he was so absurdly acrobatic on Saturday. But yeah, go to johnnytshirt.com. Check out what they got. Check out the new stuff they've got in. Check out the Sweet 16 shirts that they'll likely have. Johnny T-Shirt has been longtime supporters of Inside Carolina and of this show. And we just hope y'all do the same thing. We want you, shout out to the 4 bills of y'all in the chat right now. We want y'all to go to Johnny T-Shirt. Matter of fact, go to Johnny T-Shirt and order something right now and tell them the Coast to Coast sent you. See what happens. You can always use that premium discount code on the message boards to get your extra 10% off their already amazing prices for the low. Just show Johnny T-Shirt some love. We appreciate all that they do for the show. We want you guys to appreciate them as well because they are locally owned, alumni operated, just really, really good folks. Great selection, great customer service. Hit them up. We appreciate it. And we'll let the national guys run some of their ads right now. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about Alabama here on the Coast to Coast podcast on InsideCarolina.com. Sherrell, Sean, I'm glad you're here. Appreciate you guys as always for the insight that you bring, and appreciate everybody who's made us a part of their evening. Again, we weren't really trying to push things back, but Sean or Sherrell made the great point when we were planning for the show yesterday. He said, "Hey, we don't even know who North Carolina's going to play, so it'll be about half of the show that you guys want." So we waited to see who would win between Alabama and Grand Canyon, and man. You talk about a bunch of crackheads chasing a pipe. That's what that game looked like in the second half. I mean, it was like the new brick had showed up in West Baltimore, and the fiends came running because vials were getting stepped on, balls were getting stepped on, balls were thrown out of bounds. It was the most. It was chaos on roller skates, and it was unbelievable to watch there for about the better part of the second half. So we now know that North Carolina will play the Alabama team after beating Grand Canyon. Shout out to Grand Canyon for avoiding a letdown. I can't imagine they were prepared to play against a real school, not a diploma mill, a real university that is accredited, not a for-profit institution. Look it up. First impressions of Alabama. Sean, I'm going to let you take the microphone on this one.
First impressions for Alabama. I mean, I think in general from maybe going back a little bit, I think you have to be impressed with what they were able to do in the transfer portal in terms of who they lost last year and who they added. And they took a lot of losses early on this year out of conference, but they have been playing at an elite level offensively. I think to me, when we were doing this last week, I wrote on my notepad right here, "Don't sleep on Alabama," because I thought everybody was just glossing over them. So to me, they were the scariest team in that 4 or 5 out of any of the brackets. So I was definitely hoping they might falter early on. But I think, as elite offensively, defense, they did play probably their best game against Grand Canyon in terms of points per possession and forcing them 2 for 20, whether it's forcing them or they're just missing. But then you can look at some of the past SEC games and it's almost a race to 100 who's gonna get there first. But I think there's a lot to just dissect around this game, and it's definitely, I think the spread's around the same as it was Michigan State, but I feel Michigan or Alabama is a much better team. Offensively, they're going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on UNC in terms of just driving hard to the basket, going for a layup or kicking out. From offensive, they don't let the ball stick around too much. So I think they're number 8th in the country in terms of how long their possessions last. And you're going to watch Mark Sears. So whoever's guarding him, that's going to be, one of the bigger matchups in terms of, can you frustrate him? Inside the paint, they're shooting, around 55% over their last 6 games or so. So they get into the paint, they get good shots. And it's going to come down to, is UNC staying with them and forcing contested threes, or is that ball movement going to turn UNC to an old version of the UNC team? So a lot to digest both offensively and defensively, but this is a team that there's going to be a lot of runs, I think, on each side, and UNC is going to be playing at a tempo that, for the most part, they haven't played at, given a lot of the ACC competition and other schools that they've played.
It's weird to think about somebody trying to speed North Carolina up, especially if you've been watching Carolina basketball for more than like 3 years. Sean, I want to ask you, you were talking about Alabama's defense. How much of that game against Grand Canyon was Alabama's defense, and how much of it was just Bryce Drew being a trash offensive coach?
I mean, I think you have to look at the team as well as the defense. And I think for Alabama, defense is not their forte. It's almost the UVA. UVA's offense is Alabama's defense to a certain extent, but they do have athletes. And Pringle, coming off the bench, offers a shot blocking perspective, and I think they give up a ton of whether it's one-on-one or drives to the basket. So one of the things UNC on a typical game is going to shoot, say, 23, 24 free throws, maybe a little less per game.
They took 23 against Michigan State. I see you. Good job.
So for Alabama, over the last 5 to 7 games, teams are getting 37 attempts, which means they're attacking the basket, which then goes to Elliot Cadeau. They're going to be playing, they might even be playing in the paint, because I could see Nate Oates doing something like that. So it goes to, is UNC going to settle for open threes early, or are they going to try to be the aggressor and get to the basket? Because Alabama does play up, it does present those opportunities, and there's a lot of space to get in the paint. So, from their defense, once again, they had one of their best points per possession games. I'd say it's not as bad as they have been, because they do have athletes, and they do have some semblance of shot blockers, not to mention depth. But again, this has come to me, it's going to come down to UNC. Can UNC keep them off the offensive glass? Because they're going to get, they're going to try to get around 15 offensive rebounds a game. And that's a lot easier when you're shooting quick, the ball's going all over the place. But to me, that's one of maybe the 2 or 3 keys of the game, transitioning from their defense, but more, how do you defend them on the glass, which obviously UNC is equipped to do.
I like that, man. Sherrell, I want to ask you, and also, yeah, Sean's exactly right. Mark Sears is a hell of a ball player. Love watching that kid play. He is kind of a dog on a meat wagon while he's in a game, and he's full bore all the time. Sherrell, I want to ask you, we've all got thoughts about Nate Oates, but he plays 4 guards. Does that 4 guard, lineup, does that scare you at all? Is that something that makes you raise an eyebrow for North Carolina coming into this game?
Famous last words and everything, but I do think this is a decent matchup for UNC, just because of the way they have been able to defend all season, their rebounding advantage, and then their ability to kind of win rock fights. In the ACC, there was a lot of rock fights, a lot of slow tempo, a lot of grinded out, find a way to win with 66 or 67 possessions. Now, this game's going to have a lot more than that unless something strange happens. But I think that is one path to victory for UNC. I think for Alabama, I think that's why North Carolina is favored. For Alabama, I think there's really one way for them to win, and that's to just overwhelm UNC offensively. For UNC, I think there's multiple ways for them to win by, grabbing extra possessions with offensive rebounds, by getting to the free throw line. Alabama fouls a lot. And a lot of that is because, frankly, bringing me to the biggest key for me offensively is that they don't have the ability to stop talented big men, and they haven't for the entire season. Now, the teams that they've lost to are all really good teams. A lot of them are still playing, but I'm going to go to my favorite segment, which is called Reading. So these are some of the big guys that Alabama has played in some of their stats. So Tyrese Samuel from Florida had 18 points. Zach Edey, obviously National Player of the Year, 35-7. Jonas Adu, twice 12-7, 19-4. Jalen Williams from Auburn, 26-6. Broome from Auburn, 24-7, and then 25-14. Ballo from Arizona, 16-12. Kalkbrenner from Creighton, 19-8. I think PJ Hall had 21 against them. So it's like Grant Nelson didn't come there to be, a true 5 playing in the post. He came there to be kind of a stretch 4, maybe even a 3 to get his NBA prospects up, but they don't have anything else on the roster as big as him to guard some of these big guys, and he just has been getting really eaten up in the post. Pringle to some degree has as well. Jaron Stevenson has played some at center.
I know there's a bigger guy down there, but didn't know if you were going to get there or not. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that they can throw bodies at him, but they're not strong, adult, mature like bodies, I would say, and they haven't shown an ability to stop talented big men all season. So to me, it's kind of a situation where you get Armando the ball by any means necessary and play through him, similarly to what they did against Michigan State, because more often than not, he's either going to score or get fouled. And if you start fouling out their big guys, they don't rebound well as it is, then you can start to accumulate more possessions. And that's how you beat a team who probably is going to make 12, 13, 14 threes. You beat them by just having more possessions and fouling their guys out. So to me, offensively, that's the key. Defensively, I want everybody to look at their neighbor like you're in church and say, do not help.
Neighbor? Oh, all right. Sorry. Do not help.
Say do not help. Like
not help.
It's like it's going to have to be a situation where the guards, as good as they can, stay in front of their man. But it is a fool's errand to help off of anyone on Alabama's team, because they're going to be a shooter, especially from those corners. If you help off the corner, that's going to be deadly. They missed some against Grand Canyon, but they were wide open, and you would expect them not to miss some of those wide open looks. So I think it's just do not help defensively. And then it's ride Baycott and even Ingram in the post and rebounding. That's Carolina's path to victory for me.
I want to shout out Brendan Marks of The Athletic. He had a deep dive into, which is, I don't know if they're related, but Trevor Marks does a lot of this really good stuff too. Was doing it in game, but there was kind of a write up about North Carolina's floppy action that they were running. They were essentially spamming that entire second half, where they were running it through Armando. And it gives them options. When Michigan State would send that double team, Armando had a chance to either kick back out to the wing for a three, whether it's a pseudo rotation or not, or as you started seeing, he was having backdoor cuts from guys like Jalen Withers. Sean, is that the type of exploitation we could expect from Hubert Davis? And again, Mondo was talking about it post game, like, we just kept doing it over and over and over again because they couldn't stop it. Is that the type of thing that might be able to exploit not only Alabama's propensity to foul, but potentially North Carolina's size on the wings?
To an extent. I mean, I think you did see that in Michigan State, a little bit slower tempo game, and they were able to get Armando in great positions to go to work, or if he had a kick out, get people in the right positions. To Sherrell's point earlier about Armando and Alabama struggling on bigs, they don't have Bediako like they did last year. Or some of the, I still think, once again, Pringle, to me, despite some of his numbers, I think could be really good, although he's lacking that strength. But, to me, I see them being, probably changing things up, being a little more aggressively in creating something in their matchup specifically for UNC. And could that be, what they're doing with Armando with certain double teams? So to me, that's one of the keys, is how are they guarding Armando? I think they frustrated him last year early on. Granted, it was a different mindset, but I felt early on they were coming after him just to force the ball out of his hand. So I think if they can get him in the right position and he's feeling confident to either go to work or kick out, that can make a big difference. But, I could see them trying to junk it up a little bit with, taking Cadeau's man and just an automatic double or planning him in the paint, whatever it may be. I see them being a little more creative defensively than what Michigan State was doing. So there are certainly advantages and mismatches on both sides. So I think it will come down to, how's Armando doing? But to Sherrell's point, can Ingram get in that post, or can he find those open threes and knock them down like he was last game? And then, Cormac Ryan, when he committed, a lot of people pointed to that Alabama game that he had in the tournament and how he just went on fire. Can he have, is he able to hit some big shots as well? So I think all that goes into how UNC is running, but I think it'll look a little different than how it did when UNC was going directly to Armando in those actions.
I'll add too, and I want to ask you something, Sean. Looking at the data, Jaron Stevenson has played is the primary four for most of the last 5 games. So I do think that's an interesting matchup between what would likely be Harrison Ingram and him. because he does have the length and athleticism and reach, over Ingram. But Ingram has kind of the size and is not shy for contact, where I think that was one of the criticisms of Stevenson early on. So I think that's something to watch. It could be a situation where Stevenson plays, the game of his life and is engaged and balls out. But it also could be a situation where he's just physically overmatched because he's going against a 21-year-old who's kind of fully developed and he's still getting there. But my question was, if say Armando comes out and has 6 and 5 by the under 12 timeout, would Nate Oates go to a zone? Because it seems counter to what he likes to do, but do you think that would be effective? Would that be a move that he could make to try to mitigate UNC's advantage in the middle?
It's a good question, and I haven't watched as much Alabama to know how much they would try zone or try something different. I do think in terms of just how they game plan and some of their just from a scouting assessment that they will be a lot more creative, and maybe it's not going to zone, but you mentioned Harrison Ingram, so he's gonna get the ball and try to go over his left shoulder for the little hook in the middle, right? So he has the power over Stevenson or over Griffin, depending on who's guarding him. But are they going to maybe overplay him, force him the other way, or bring a double and just do some, just kind of go at him a little bit more, a little bit differently. So I don't know if it's a zone per se, but I definitely see them throwing a lot of different styles of double teams from different directions, and just trying to junk it up a little bit more than they have been, because at the end of the day, they're not a defensive team. They can't really get worse than what they have been doing. So you might as well throw a little bit of the kitchen sink in there, especially this UNC team where there are some opportunities to play off of people, or focus on players at different levels.
All right, fellas. I love that question, Sherrell, and I appreciate you throwing it, Sean, because I think it's a pretty strong insight for folks as they're looking towards what Alabama may try to do to stop North Carolina. Sherrell, you touched on a little bit earlier. You mentioned keys to victory. So I want to say, is there anything specifically, Sean, that you want to share that might be one of your one or two keys to victory? And if it's part of your 2 pennies, then save it.
Well, haven't thought of the 2 pennies, so that'll hopefully come over the next few minutes. But I think offensive rebounding from Alabama, which we talked about, is one key. Obviously the 3-point shooting, they're going to be firing them up. Are they hitting 15 like they've done twice in the past 7 games, or is it in the 8 or 9 mark at a higher volume? So I think those 2 things, and then getting into transition. Offensively, Alabama pushing the pace, attacking the rim, just kind of wild and crazy to a certain extent. Defensively, UNC is number 2 in the country when it comes to transition defense. So that's obviously a clash at the middle in terms of two opposite spectrums. I felt Michigan State probably did a disservice to them. Not that it's in their wheelhouse, but early on they looked to be aggressive, pushing the ball, and I felt they went away from that, where it looked like they did have some opportunities. UNC felt a little slow in terms of getting back, but UNC is going to have to crash the glass, and then if they don't get it, they're going to have to be back and be in position, which can hopefully alleviate any bad fouls that they may have to take. So I would say those 3, just more from how Alabama plays, and then the last one would just be, when they're playing well, Alabama's getting 4, 5, 6 guys in double figures. I think Sears is going to have his 20 plus no matter what. It comes.
Absolutely.
How efficient is that? How efficient is Strata going to be? And if you can just get them down a little bit while at the same time taking away everybody else, similar to what they did at Michigan State, those are the keys to me in terms of looking at how Alabama plays and looking at some of their strengths and how UNC can try to negate those.
All right, Sherrell, is there any other key or keys that you'd like to mention as well? Do you feel like we can probably segue into some questions from our live audience?
Yeah, let's segue. I just think it's running them off the 3-point line by not helping. If they drive into the basket and get floaters mid-range, you let them have it all day.
Tip
and
your
then
cap.
and then not force feeding it, but making sure Armando Bacot gets a lot of touches.
And if nothing else, UNC fans should be somewhat should feel somewhat good about that sort of game plan, because you saw how North Carolina was able to get the ball to Bacot for a majority of that game. I mean, the first basket was his against Michigan State, even when the first 10 minutes or so were looking rough, and then once they got into a groove, man, they fed the big man and let him eat. All right, got a couple of good questions from the folks here in the live audience. Appreciate everybody being here. Almost 5 bills in here now. Thank y'all. All right, so we'll go ahead and go for this one. From John Causey in the chat. I'd love to know what the fellas think about the X factor for next game. John seems to think it's bench play. Sherrell, X factor, give me one.
I'm going to go back to what I've said all year. I still think it's Elliot Cadeau, especially in a game that could be up tempo. I'm not basing this on statistics. This is just anecdotal, but it feels like the more possessions, the games that have had more possessions for UNC, the better he's played. So if it does turn into a track meet, that's kind of where he excels. So that could unlock something in UNC that hasn't been there, because they haven't played a ton of high tempo, lots of possession games this year. So to me, it's still him, and it's always going to be him.
I would agree with that. And if we've seen anything else, I feel like he's at his best when he's wide open. That's not to say he can't hit a beautiful backdoor pass like he did in traffic to Bacot in the first half against Michigan State. But yeah, he's better when he's wide open. This isn't a question so much, but I want to share that. Go ahead,
Joey. Just to stay on that quickly. I think for him, once again, how is he going to react when they are playing so far off of him? I think, look, let him 1 to 2 threes at certain points of the game. No problem with that, especially at a
He's got to take them. He has to take them.
But once again, can he look to, hit the pull up jump, take the pull up from 15? But I think the more aggressive he is early on, in terms of, once again, not let them dictate what they're doing, but the more he's attacking, I think that's the better he can be for his mindset. Obviously, Trimble is going to get a lot of time in this game guarding Sears and guarding Estrada. And I think this game is going to suit his style offensively. But, that basket Cadeau had in the second half against Michigan State, coming out of the timeout, and it looked like Michigan State just fell asleep for a second, and he just blew right by him, got to the layup. There's going to be a lot of those opportunities. So I agree with Sherrell, but once again, can he not let them say, "Hey, you're wide open, just shoot it"? He's going to take 1 or 2, but once again, the more aggressive he is, that's just going to put them on their heels, and it'll create another offensive weapon for UNC.
I think his ability to detect that slight hesitation or that slight relaxation by his man is next level, because as soon as he detects that, he's usually at the glass with it. This isn't a question, but I want to shout out Austin Cleaver for sharing it, and this is right up your alley, both of you guys. Small sample size from the last month, Alabama is in the 40s in offensive efficiency. So something to think about. I don't know what's changed there, but I do like that somebody shared that.
I'd say it's the variance. You've seen they have 3 games that are 1.3 points per possession, which off the charts, and then you have a few games where it's at the bottom, and a lot of that goes to how their 3-point shooting is, because they're getting 50% from 2. They're getting offensive rebounds. So I think they're a very high variance team, which can be either really good or extremely frustrating. They're just hitting crazy stuff.
And I would say the other thing, Dean Smith always said, Coach Smith always said, you kind of build your momentum in the tournament, and maybe that's what they're doing, because we love Bart Torvik, and you can sort and all this stuff. So I just sorted it from a month ago, February 25th, and they are the 54th best team in the country over the last month. They're 4-3. Of course, 2 of those wins have come in the last 3 days, but they weren't playing well to end the regular season, and I don't know that they're particularly playing great now. They just happened to pull it out against Grand Canyon. Now, obviously, like Sean said, I think their high is Kentucky high offensively. So that's always scary, just because, you saw it happen to Nebraska. I think Nebraska was playing as good as anyone entering the tournament. And then, my opinion, Sean, and then Wade Taylor,
Big Ten. So you got to
fair enough. And then one of the worst shooting teams, probably the worst shooting team in the tournament outside of Virginia, decides to go nuclear from 3, and your season's over. So that's the tough part, is you just don't know if they're going to make 18 threes or they're going to make 7. If they make 7 threes, then UNC should win pretty comfortably. I think UNC can withstand 14 or 15, all things considered, but you just don't know, and that's the scary part about a team like Alabama.
And I mean, you can go back to last year's game. UNC gets up 8, and then boom, they're just obviously a different team, but that goes back to the different runs. And when UNC has those opportunities to build the lead, well, we always say you got to take advantage of that, so you have a little cushion when those runs do come.
So I want to share another question here from WH1315. What's the ideal number of minutes for Jalen Washington, Jalen Withers, and Trimble versus Alabama? And I'll throw a caveat in there too. Is it that they need a certain number of minutes, or is it that UNC needs a certain amount of production from them? As we've seen, I think that sweet spot from North Carolina production-wise looks like a line that's somewhere between 10 and 14 points or more, and somewhere between 8 and 12 rebounds seems to be the sweet spot, at least when the team has had success. But Sean, I'll throw that to you. Is there an ideal number of minutes you want to see combined from those three guys?
I mean, you look at Michigan State, I think it was probably in the 38, 39 total minutes between the three. I go more, Joe, to your point of what are they doing in the game? Alabama is deep. They're going to be running a ton of guys out there. They're going to be getting up and down. Once again, it's weird to say that this is going to be a little – UNC have no issue with them playing up tempo like Alabama, but they're not as conditioned to it as in years past. And to me, it does almost bring back the Auburn game a little bit, where all of a sudden, UNC is so used to pushing the ball down people's throat and getting those easy baskets, and Auburn was doing it to them. Different athletes for this Auburn versus Alabama squad, but I think it is going to be important to play depth. I didn't think we'd see Wojcik in non-first round games, and we saw him play some great minutes at the end of the second half.
Great minutes.
Now, Alabama, we've talked about teams athletically. I think Michigan State a little more plodding and strong, fits to his skill set a little more than the athleticism of Alabama. But I think is Trimble locking down Sears? Is he attacking the basket? Washington, when he took that face-up jump shot early on in the first half, just brought the biggest smile to my face, because that's just automatic. So for him defensively, it's going to be important. Is he, they're going to probably try to put him in high ball screens, get him out of sorts so they can play him off the court. And then Withers, what he did was beautiful, just the off-ball movement, working together, defensive rebound. So I think this is a game he could excel at. And if those three are playing efficiently and effectively, that just spells Baycott and others. So, I would say it's almost a mirror to an extent of the Michigan State game, but I think all three can hopefully produce at a high level, because they will be needed.
So another question I'd like to share with you guys is from Che Armstrong. Who's the most scariest team in LA? And I immediately think like the most beautifulest thing in this world. Who is the most scariest team in LA? Sherrell, Arizona, Alabama, or Clemson, or North Carolina?
I'll answer it this way. The scariest team for UNC, I mean, obviously they're playing Alabama, so that's in front of you, but I'm going to be weird and say Clemson, because they know UNC very well. They play twice a year, almost every year. And Ian Shefflin may be the only player to really, really get in the head, and I guess DR too, to get in the head of Harrison Ingram and frustrate him to the point where he was almost ineffective. And that happened twice against Clemson. If you just go back and look at the box scores, he has Harrison Ingram's number right now. Those tall, kind of not even tall and athletic, but tall and strong, I think, fours do give Ingram a little bit of trouble. And then we obviously know what PJ Hall can do. So they can match UNC on the inside. They've got guys coming off the bench who can match UNC on the inside. And then it's just a matter of guards hitting shots. So, I mean, obviously Arizona is the better team. They're higher seeded. They won more games, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the knowing each other factor makes Clemson a little scary, because they know UNC's tendencies and have already beat them in the Smith Center, one time this year.
Also, I want to give a shout out to, while you're talking about Clemson, I want to give a shout out to Brad Brownell for calling out the Big 12 earlier this year, and then actually, backing it up, because he's got his team in the Sweet 16 now. He called them out for how they were exploiting the net with their scheduling, and good on him for having Clemson deliver. And they have looked good in their first two games. PJ Hall looks like the guy everybody thought he would be, and ACC fans are well aware of who he is. Two more questions, and we'll get to our two pennies. This comes from Irvin. Have the players convinced you that they're past the pitfalls that they encountered in the last weeks of the season? That's a good question. Sean, you feel better about this than you felt, maybe. And when you say pitfalls, the last weeks of the season really was just a loss to NC State. But I see where Irvin's going. Do you have more confidence in this team after, maybe the way they rebounded against Michigan State? So you're looking like, did Michigan State make you forget about NC State? I think I'm going to actually put words in Irvin's mouth there.
Well, I think it's a great question. And, just for me, I think, once again, this team has been fantastic to watch in terms of how they've played together. I think that first 10 minutes of the Michigan State game, even though I felt pretty confident UNC would beat them, like in my mind, I'm going, okay, once again, is this team that one seed talent that we have seen in the past, or is it that 2006-ish type team that overachieved? And I think Michigan State, they proved they can rise to the occasion. I think for me, I still want them to prove that, hopefully the next four games. So once again, I think offensively, we've seen them hit some lulls, whether that was early in the season, mid-season, end of the season at times, and that still has been the case. So there is still that concern when they go through those scoring periods, or they're relying a little too much on RJ, things of that nature. But they've proven how tough they are in terms of getting it together, even when leads get shrunk to 2 points or 4 points, whether it was at Duke or Michigan State. They've been able to go on those runs. But obviously with March, all it takes is one game and you're out of there. But I think this team is just mentally tough, which I love to see. So I don't know if it's taken away, but it's still a concern in my mind. But I think that goes to the just general, I don't know, not makeup of the team, but maybe that ceiling of the team and what it is and where it and when is it gonna maybe disappear.
All right, Sherrell, last question I'm going to hit for you. And I don't want to talk about the future of this roster considering that there's still games going on, but I think this is a good question. With the transfer portal already open, how does North Carolina approach it while still playing? And I think that's a legit question for that probably some of our subscribers are actually curious about. You always try to tell everybody to live in the moment and enjoy the ride, but this is the first time that the portal's been open during the season. So, want to throw that at you and see what your response would be for that one.
Yeah, it's possible to do both. It'd be malpractice, honestly, to not look towards next season if you're the coaching staff. You have to, because if not, you can get left behind. Iowa State already has a commitment from the transfer portal, the center from Charlotte, and they have a game this weekend. So it's possible to do both the way Carolina approaches it, because they do have a little more cachet than a lot of schools, frankly, and that's just how it is. Some people don't want to hear that, but they can do things differently. Duke and Kentucky and Kansas and Carolina can do things differently. They can, I don't want to say slow play guys, but they can let them know that, hey, there's not going to be anything going on with UNC in the portal until after the season's over, which is kind of the message that they've given to some of the players who I think are reaching out or might have interest. What they are doing is, as players come into the portal, they've kind of got a recruiting board, and they're talking through it and identifying people that they might like. And while they might not directly call them and say, hey, we're interested, they might say, we got to figure out what this roster is going to look like. There's some guys who have decisions to make. Once they make those decisions, we'll be ready to go. And it should happen in X amount of time, depending upon how long the season lasts. So they're doing, again, in silence and inaction are two different things. And this UNC staff is very quiet in how they approach things. That doesn't mean they're not working behind the scenes. They definitely are. They're monitoring the portal, creating a recruiting board, talking behind the scenes. And when the season ends, they'll be ready to go kind of at 100 miles per hour, because they're going to have to.
The Nobel poet laureate Carter once said that real G's move in silence like lasagna. And I think that would apply to how North Carolina recruits the transfer portal. We had TJ Beisner on here from the Secondary Break Club. We're talking about, just because you're not hearing about UNC doing things publicly doesn't mean things aren't happening. And we've been able to kind of confirm that at Inside Carolina, that stuff's happening. It's just we're not at a place where we can report on it. And North Carolina's not at a place where they're being flashy because they got games going on and they're playing this weekend in Los Angeles.
Yeah, if you're on the premium board, we're trying to leave breadcrumbs, so to speak, as much as we can, as far as who might they be interested in the portal, like portal names to know, that kind of thing. So check that out as they come in. We post them, but that's kind of where things are now, kind of in a standstill. And then when the season ends, it'll get busy.
Now you said that, like, if you're on the premium board, are you insinuating that somebody might not? Who would not be on the premium board, Sherrell? Like, who are those people? Who would not subscribe to Inside Carolina Premium at
Haters?
this time of the year? Haters? Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Hater losers. Nah, I'm not ripping on you, but I will say, need y'all to step up your game. If you have not joined IC Premium, go ahead and do that. It's the best money you'll ever spend. And you know, just you're not going to get any sort of information like what you're going to find on Inside Carolina's premium content. Basketball, football, you know, shoot, if UNC comes out with a pickleball team, I see you. We'll be all over that too. All right, guys, it's that time. I appreciate everybody dropping the good questions in the chat. I love being able to answer stuff from you guys when we're doing a live show. It's time for our 2 cents, brought to you by our friends at Congruity. Y'all know the drill with Congruity. I see your little messages in the chats. Y'all want to know what Congruity's up to and how what Congruity can do for your small and medium-sized business might help this North Carolina basketball team. Well, my man Sean Moran loves offensive efficiency, and he probably had to slap an NC-17 rating on that UConn game on Friday night because I think their OE number was like at 1.5 or something like that, something absurd. Well, if you're thinking about efficiency, let's think about how Congruity can help your business be as efficient as possible. Let them take care of your benefits and payroll issues and all of the sorts of back office stuff that you as a business owner get weighed down by. You want to go worrying about scaling your business. You want to worry about whatever maybe you've got an exit strategy where you're trying to sell off. Well, let them handle the payroll and the benefits and the HR stuff, and you focus on that stuff that really drives your bottom line. Or the stuff that really drives your top line. Either way, benefits, HR, and payroll ain't it. Let Congruity handle it. That's what they're in the business for. They have helped tons of small and medium-sized businesses and Tar Heel fans like yourselves take care of their business. So go to Congruity HR /Tar Heels. They'll let you take that business assessment. They'll tell you how they might be able to help save you some money, how they might be able to take some things off your plate, and just make you a more effective business owner. And then you can get your offensive efficiency numbers up like what UConn did to that poor program they played Friday evening. All right, guys, give me 2 pennies. 2 cents brought to you by Congruity. Sean, go at it.
Got a lot, but we'll condense it to 2. Not a penny, but looking forward to being at crypto.com arena in person.
Oh, you got to rub that in, don't you?
I mean, it's
the jerk store called.
It's rare the Heels are coming out.
They're running out of you.
LA.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
You can give me one game out here. Two games.
Okay, that's
four games out west, hopefully.
Unless they lose. If they lose, then you're absolutely not allowed to go to any more games. But go ahead.
Nah, I've been to enough wins before, so. One, looking forward to that coming to LA, but I think one, RJ Davis, first team All-American. He struggled last year against Alabama. They're obviously going to be focusing on him, trying to force him into shots. I thought there was a few moments against Michigan State where he was a little out of sorts a little bit. So can he really play at that All-American level, which we all know he can, but looking forward to seeing how he does and how he, does he try to get into a battle with Sears, matching him shot for shot, or what type of game is he going to play, or more let it come to him? And then really just going back to those stats, I think there's a lot of key factors to look at, but at the end of the day, just from a stats perspective, offensive rebounding for Alabama, number of free throws for UNC, and last week we talked about 2-point percentage from UNC when they're getting in the paint, taking good shots, shooting over 50%. For the most part, they're winning the game. Alabama's usually giving that up, whether it's a win or loss. So how effective can UNC be inside that 3-point line? So those are my 2 pennies. Could probably go on for a few more because they'll need some big performances, but we'll throw it over to Sherrell.
So thanks. You took Joey's job.
Carolina, I get to throw things. You don't throw things. Okay. That's me.
Let him throw it.
I throw things over. I was going to ask Sean, does he have any concessions or good bites around the around the arena that he can share with anybody who might be headed out that way?
If you are in downtown LA, used to live there, it's not the most desirable place, but Guisado's is a great food spot, maybe a 10-minute walk from crypto.com. And there is a good, really good fried chicken spot in crypto.com, Ludo Bird, I believe it is. But check out Guisado's, and then there's plenty of places for drinks right around there, and I'll hopefully be having a beverage or two before the games as well.
How far is that Roscoe's at Pico and La Brea? How far is that from the arena?
Depends on the time of day.
Okay, sorry. Sherrell, go ahead with your 2 pennies, sir. Let's hear your contribution to the fountain tonight.
What if I have an LA restaurant recommendation?
Do your thing, bro. Don't let me don't let me get in the way of your West Side connection.
Why are you holding back on me all these years?
So Joyce Restaurant, actually a longtime listener from IC, I won't mention his name, but he sent a note.
Look,
and
he's a good guy. I know who you're talking about. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So the co-owner is a Michelin award-winning chef. Co-owner is a big Carolina fan, North Carolina native. So Joyce Restaurant, for those of you who are in the LA area, it's not far from crypto. Go check it out. So the other thing, I guess for my 2 pennies, these are kind of, I won't say dark, but they're not great. Let's put it that way. So Carolina is done really well in regional semifinals. I always use 1990 as the date I go back to for stuff, because that's kind of when I'm old enough to remember things.
Was that
They've only
Oklahoma?
lost, yeah, but then they lost to Arkansas in the Sweet 16.
Oh,
so they've only
40 minutes of hell.
Yeah, they've only lost 4 times in the Sweet 16 since 1990, and obviously they've been in the Sweet 16 a lot since 1990. So Arkansas in 1990, Ohio State in 92, which was Hubert Davis's last game, and then Wisconsin in 2015 and Auburn in 2019. The things that are kind of dark, the last 2 are related to this, because the game against Wisconsin, they were a number 4 seed, was in Los Angeles, and Carolina lost. They had a lead in the second half, lost the game. Wisconsin went on to upset undefeated Kentucky, and then blew a second half lead against Duke, and Duke won the national championship. So that's not great. And then in 2019 was the only time UNC has ever lost in a regional semifinal as the number 1 seed. And that, of course, was the Auburn game, where a certain virus affected that UNC team that was so fun to watch. So
that was Corona 17. Yes.
Yeah. So Carolina's had a lot of success in this round historically. And of course, they won in 2022 against UCLA. So we'll see what happens. And I do think Hubert Davis has shown that he's a pretty good coach with time to scout an opponent. You kind of wish maybe they were on Friday, so they had that extra day to prepare. But I think they are actually on their way to Los Angeles now. So they should be there, be able to acclimate for a couple of days, and then be ready for a late tip on Thursday. But yeah, North Carolina really good in regional semifinals is kind of the penny, or the 2 pennies, I would say.
Well, you have a remarkable way of even making the dark stats seem bright, sir, and we're grateful for you. And you had me look at my neighbor today and tell my neighbor that, neighbor, don't help down. So, look, man, I love what you guys bring. I know that it causes folks' heart rates to go up, and all sorts of issues when North Carolina's playing deep in the season, especially when it's win or go home situations. But I feel like y'all bring it more when you get to the short rows of the season. So just grateful for y'all being on the show. Shout out to everybody, the almost 500 folks, and we were over 500 at one point, that took us in live tonight. Remember, smash, like, subscribe, rate, review, all that stuff that you usually do to show people what you think of their online content. Do that for us. We appreciate it. Very appreciative of Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring. Sherrell's holding his hand up. Yes, sir.
One last thing, I'm gonna put you 2 on the spot. Will we be doing a podcast about the rest of the season next week, or will we be doing a podcast about how the season went next week?
Man, I ain't answering that. I ain't putting that juju into the atmosphere. Are you crazy? What's wrong with you, Sean? Don't you say a word. You stay muted.
Take a stand.
Stay muted, Sean. Don't you say it. You're going to the games. Don't you say it.
You know me, Sherrell. We'll be talking about what
I swear to God, I'm going to have John edit this out.
What next season looks like.
Wow. Okay. Well, now let me go pick everybody up off the floor, as I was trying to get out of here in good feelings. Appreciate John Sigley producing. Appreciate Johnny T-Shirt sponsoring. Appreciate Congruity sponsoring. I don't appreciate Sherrell and Sean for forcing us to say that before we get out of here, but grateful for everybody who listened to us, whether you tuned us in live or listen to us in your podcast feed later on. Either way, we're glad to be here. I am Joey Powell for Inside Carolina. The Coast to Coast will be back very soon. We'll talk to you later.